Are you all right?
Yep.
You sure?
Yeah.
Are you here for me or for the drinks? Come on, be honest. How many of you are here?
Both.
So, greetings from the United States. I thought I'd start with a joke. President Trump. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Don't worry, that's not going to happen, I hope. Usually I take about 2 hours to do what I'm going to do in 30 minutes here. So I hope you're ready for me to talk really fast, talk about a lot of stuff, and push your thinking about what the next decade probably looks like for all of us in education, whether we are in K-12, whether we are in higher ed. There is some very interesting stuff coming down the pike for all of us, and I want to just run through that fairly quickly here today. So, if you want the 2 hours worth of stuff, you can send me an email at more@richardson.com, and I'll send you all sorts of links, I'll send you all sorts of resources, blogs to read, Twitter accounts to follow, articles to read, all sorts of other stuff that will help you kind of build your own context around what I'm talking about here today, because I'm telling you, this is going to be really hard for me to do in 30 minutes. It's going to be almost impossible. So just one last reminder, if you want more than 30 minutes, send me an email. Okay, so I've got a book of mine where the first person who can tell me, or maybe even come close to tell me how long it's been since the first school somewhere in the world had a one-to-one laptop implementation for every kid in the school. Any guesses? You gotta shout it out really loud. 20? Any other guesses? 30? Someone wanna go in the middle?
25.
27, you win. It's 26. 26 years since Methodist Ladies College basically gave every one of their girls a laptop. And those girls were using laptops more interestingly 26 years ago than most kids are using laptops in schools today. They were programming, they were solving problems, they were making things, they were doing all sorts of interesting things with those laptops. And basically, it leads me to the question, what's changed over those years? My short answer is not much. Not much has changed. I've had the opportunity to go all across the world, visit lots of different schools. I'm going to Amsterdam tomorrow. It's almost every place that I go, kids are using technologies that we give them in very conservative ways. They're handing in digital homework. They're doing digital worksheets. They're using them in a teaching sense, not so much in a learning sense. And I'm tired. I got off the plane at 6 this morning, so I'm a little grumpy. So when I'm walking around the vendor floor today, I have one question for vendors when I go on into conferences like this, and that is, how does your product move agency over learning to the learner? That's it. That's the only question that really matters to me right now, not just as an educator, but as a parent and as someone who has learned with social media and technology for the last 15 years. How does your product give me more potential and opportunity to learn on my own? That is what I am most concerned with. Now, why does this matter? Well, it matters for a couple of reasons. Number one, because kids are learning more with their own technologies outside of school than they're learning with our technologies inside of school. That's the absolute fact. Kids are using technologies on their own in transformative ways that don't often show up in schools. And the other reason why this is really relevant for me is because I own 2 teenagers. Any of you own 2 teenagers at the moment? So fun times, right? Really interesting. This is one of the few pictures that we have. I think this is number 7 in the series of both of my kids being in the same place, being happy at the same time. I don't think that she just pushed them off the boat. This was their Titanic impersonation, in case you can't tell. But my son is 16, that's Tucker. My daughter Tess is 18, and it's really interesting for me as a parent to watch the way that they learn with technology outside of school versus the way they learn with technology inside of school. And I am learning more from them by watching that than just about anything else. Now, here's the reality for my children and for the kids that you serve in your schools. They all live in a world where they have access to pretty much the sum of human knowledge in their pockets. There's almost nothing that they can't access in terms of information and knowledge. It's not 100%, but it's pretty close. And I'm not saying that all this knowledge is necessarily good stuff. There's a lot of crap in this picture, and they need a good crap detector to figure out what's good and what's bad. But I'm a big advocate for open phone tests. Why would we ask kids questions and then not let them take the technologies out of their pocket to answer those questions? School's the only place in the world where that happens. Everywhere else, my kids just take out their technology and begin to try to answer the questions. So that they have access to this, which is different from most of us in this room when we were growing up and when we were in school. It's also different. Look, that they have access to about 3.5 billion people. And I look at this picture and I go, that's potentially 3.5 billion teachers. there are lots of people out there who they can learn from and are learning from in powerful ways. People who have nothing to do with school. People who are connected to their passions and interests in ways that is difficult for people in school to be. And that's an interesting new development, and I think it's a huge opportunity. And they have millions of technologies. I think there are 2 million apps in the App Store now. Just, walk around this place, and if you think this is interesting, like Ian said, or one of the speakers said, just wait till next year, right? It's constantly changing. We have no idea when this is going to end. We have no idea actually what half of this stuff means, how to use it. It's overwhelming on a lot of different levels. But it is a new reality that we as educators, and specifically you as school leaders, better have your brains wrapped around right now. Because that is the reality that your kids are learning in when they leave you. This is not their reality in school. We restrict technology, we restrict people, we restrict content, left and right. And so the two now are very different. There is this disconnect that is growing in schools all over the world around how kids do it outside of school and what kids are allowed to do inside of school around this. This is hugely complex. It's around self-organization, it's around passion. Kids are making things, they're sharing things, they're transparent. I don't know if you knew this, but there are going to be 3 billion photos uploaded to the web today, and my kids will take like 7,000 of those without question. They're home right now on Instagram, on Snapchat. I'm allowed to stalk them on Instagram, which is really nice, but I don't know what they're doing on Snapchat. But they are constantly creating and sharing, again, in ways that don't happen in school. They're doing it for real audiences, they're pursuing their own interests and questions. If I had more time, I would talk to you about how their passions are leading to the best learning that they do. So here's some new realities for you, and this is the one slide I have here. This is filled with text, and I apologize. But remember, if you want this slide deck, more at willrichardson.com. I'll send you the whole deck, and you can get all sorts of other stuff. But here you go. This is not what you signed up for when you went into education, and this is not the reality that you became a leader in, but it is now. Current systems of schooling are barriers to progress right now. Systems are entrenched, and they do not change. They do not move. It is very, very difficult. Access to and creation of information is not controllable. You cannot control it. You may try, but you are not going to control it outside of school. Learners are now designers of their own education. You want to learn something, you go learn it. Talk to an 8-year-old kid who has learned Minecraft. Ask that kid if he has learned Minecraft or she has learned Minecraft at a workshop or in a class. They have not. They have simply gone and designed their own curriculum and found their own teachers and spent time on YouTube and just done all that stuff that we as learners do. Courses are now acts of composition and creation. They are organic. They flow with the passions and interests of the learners in that course. Professional development is now the responsibility of the professional. If you want to learn Twitter, go learn Twitter. Don't wait for the Twitter workshop. Again, we need to be more like 8-year-olds in our adult learning when it comes to that. Learning is now the work. There was a survey that just came out yesterday before I got on the plane in the States that said that 80% of kids who were surveyed 5 years out of college said that the skills that they learned in college were obsolete in 5 years, and that they basically had to constantly upskill, constantly learn to keep up with the pace of change and to keep up with how many things, new things that they had to do. Leaders, you guys have to redefine rational behavior. We can no longer look at some of the stuff that we do in schools and say, yes, that's best for kids, because it's not. There are a lot of things we do that are simply easier for us, but they're not best for kids, and as leaders, we have to redefine that conversation. We have to change that narrative. Curriculum is just a guess. The problem is the guess has been around for about 100 years. It hasn't really changed very much. Technology is really not about teaching, and that's what kind of disgruntles me as I walk the vendor floor, because all of this is about teaching. It's not about learning. It's not about agency. It's not about moving agency to learn. Access requires that shift, and curriculum can no longer be orthodoxy. Curriculum now has to be strategy, where we pull from our curriculum to meet kids' needs in the moment, not say everybody's going to learn the Pythagorean theorem on this day, in this way, in this class, with this teacher, and be assessed in this particular way. We can't do that anymore, because that doesn't reflect the real learning world. So schools are going to have to change. And how many of you know Seymour Papert? Yay! People actually have heard of Seymour Papert. You need to read Seymour Papert. If you are interested in the intersection between learning and technology, you need to read Mindstorms. It is the most important book. It was written 25 years ago. But Papert says this is absolutely true. It's no longer about being able to do what you were taught to do. Now it's about being able to do what you were not taught to do. To be resourceful, to be problem solving in the moment, to do things in ways that kind of break the mold, go outside of the box. So schools are going to have to be places where kids do work that matters, where they are globally connected, where they're asking interesting questions, where they have real audiences. One of the most frustrating things to me as a parent is that I can count on one hand how many things my kids did in their combined 22 years of public schooling that actually live in the world, that actually solved a real problem in the world. Almost everything they did was just passed back and forth between the teacher, was just simply assessed, hung on the wall, or whatever else. It didn't have any real value. They need to make, and you can see evidence of that all over the place. In fact, one of the best booths is right across the hall right there. Agency over learning, having mentors, cultures of learning, etc. So, where do we start? That part of the presentation, which lasted how long? 10 minutes? Usually takes about an hour. So, if you can wrap your brain around that change, which is much bigger than I could articulate in 10 minutes, then the question becomes, well, how do we begin to change? Where do we as school leaders begin to start having these conversations around really moving schools from what I call from old to bold, for lack of a better word, right? From old traditional kinds of narratives and thinking around what a school should look like, to more bold ideas about what should be happening in classrooms and how we should be preparing kids for the worlds that they're going to live in, which is what Ian touched on a little bit before. Now look, this is really, really difficult. I get it. The barriers are really huge here. And basically, there are similar barriers just about everywhere that you go. Higher education has certain expectations, parents have certain expectations, we have cultures that are mostly teacher-centric in our schools, not learning-centric. There's a lot of money issues and financial issues, there's an emphasis on data, the pace of change in and of itself is really slow. So I get it, this is really hard work. I'm not in any way suggesting that if you embark on a true path of change for your school, that it's going to take any less than 5 to 7 years. And the schools that I'm working with, this is the commitment that they make, that they are going to go through a very clear process to build capacity, to have conversations, to understand the world as it is, and then to make decisions based on a very different worldview, very different context from the one that most schools are making decisions on right now. Most schools still see the world in a very 20th century way, if not 19th century way. But schools are going to have to look at this through a more modern context, and that takes time. So I'm going to give you 4 steps really fast. And maybe we will have time for questions because I'm talking so fast. I don't know. Here they are. This is really brief, but I do think there are 4 steps to change. The first is you are going to have to learn. You as leaders are going to have to build your capacity